James, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks, Andrew. How are you?
Good, good. And just waiting for Anthony to come in there. I think he's here now. Anthony, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you. How you going?
Very good, very good. You?
Very, very good. Thanks. Thanks for having me again, Andrew.
No problem. Well, this is it's a bit of a surprise, but it's I think it's the episode that we've all been looking forward to doing the most since Sunday evening. Um, Obviously, Inter have made it. They're in the Champions League. How did you live the match, James?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch it live as I was working, so I had to wait till I came home and watched the replay. And I think my nerves were shot to bits watching it. And by that time, there was nowhere open. I didn't have a beer, which I could have done with, because the game was just an emotional roller coaster. I mean, like that start with that freak on goal that Lazio got, I don't know what it is with that stadium. As we've seen in the Champions League, Roma got one off James Milner's face, and then we managed to make it 1-1, and just 2-1 before half time, Lazio went ahead, and I'm thinking, this is not going to happen for Inter. It's just not going to happen at all. And then with the drama of the penalty that we got given and got taken away, and eventually we got one. But as soon as the Lulic sending off happened, I felt like we were going to get it. And then we scored with, I think, about 10 minutes to go, and I think that was the longest 10 minutes of my life. It was very hard to take. But we got there in the end, and it was just pure jubilation and ecstasy. And even though it was, I think, 3 o'clock in the morning here in Ireland, it was, by the time I had watched it, had to do my best not to scream the house down to make everyone. So I'm very, very happy with it. How was your experience of watching it?
It was brilliant. It was everything that the song Pazza Inter, the song Pazza Inter is about. Crazy Inter. Just the fact that they never ever do anything the easy way. They always make it as difficult as possible for themselves. The heart to still go on and win the match, being 2-1 down and completely out of it. I just think the heart that was shown was the most significant aspect of the performance. What did you think about it, Anthony?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Hey, James. It was great, fantastic. But the biggest word I'd use to describe it was just relief. I think because so many times this season Inter has failed to collect points in the dying moments of the match, letting in late goals. It was always built up to be one of those dramatic finishes. Of course, I was most impressed with the fact that we were able to come back from behind twice. I think after conceding once, I still have a lot of faith that we'd come back. But after conceding the 2-1 to Felipe Anderson just before halftime, I had to admit I was pretty down at that point. I thought that was pretty much it for us. But Pazza Inter, indeed, that 3.5 minutes in between the De Vrij challenge, which I'm sure we'll speak about a lot, the Jojic red card, and then the penalty, and then the turnaround with Vecino. It all just went so crazy for me. And to be honest, the best thing for me was in those dying few 2 and 3 minutes, we did not look like conceding. Even with 10 men, I still expected to just receive cross after cross after cross and expect to defend, or expect to make mistake after mistake. But they did not look like once that we were going to concede in those dying moments. And that for me was amazing. And even when we won, it was more just relief. I didn't run around celebrating. I was just so relieved and happy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start with the De Vrij challenge because I think it's the biggest talking point from the match. We were talking about this last week, Anthony, that Inzaghi was probably putting him in an impossible position if he did play him, and that it was almost written in the stars that something like that was going to happen. I personally don't think that it was deliberate. I know a lot of Laziali will vehemently disagree with me on that. But he put in a really good performance through the match. If he really wanted to sort of assist Inter, his new club, or it will be his new club next season, I don't think he would have put in a performance like that. He also looked destroyed when he conceded the penalty. And a really key indicator for me is when he conceded the penalty, because when he conceded the penalty, it was only to potentially make it 2-2, which would have left Inter sitting outside the Champions League. Inter that still then had to go on and win. He couldn't have known, nobody could have known that Inter were going to go and get the third goal. So it just, to me, yeah, everybody will scream he's done it deliberately so that he can go and play the Champions League next year. But it just the fact that it was 2-2 late on, you'd still have expected Lazio to go on and qualify. I'm just not convinced that it was sort of dirty tactics. I don't know. What did you think of it, Anthony?
No, I've looked at the challenge a fair few times, and I don't think there was anything intentional about it. Whether or not there was something subconscious or there for De Vrij, we'll never know. But I don't think there was anything there, to be honest. I thought it was a legitimate kind of challenge. He couldn't have known that Icardi was going to fake like that. But, you know, the rest I'll say is history. I just hope that he didn't have to walk into too much of an awkward locker room at the end of the match. And his reactions after the match said it all. He really did look destroyed. And I think he was a fantastic performer throughout the match for them, just like he has been for them all season. He seems like a very professional athlete. So I'm very happy to have him here next season. But, you know, once again, it's just crazy how it all happened, really. And it just seemed like it was all scripted.
Yeah, what did you think, James? Would you be in agreement, or did you think that there was the potential for underhandness there?
No, I think I'd have to agree with both ears on it. I mean, like, he genuinely went for the ball. I think he was just a little bit late, and Icardi was just a bit too clever for him. And like both you said, he was absolutely distraught, especially when he was taken off. I mean, like, if that wasn't a genuine feeling, then I think Hollywood needs to sign him up, because he's a very good actor as well, because the guy looked like genuinely distraught. So I know, especially with it being Italy, and I think it almost worked out exactly like you had said last week, Andrew, if he slipped and Icardi scored. But I mean, I think it was very genuine, and yeah, he played his heart out and he gave all for Lazio, and I think he was devastated that he couldn't get his team over the line. But I mean, he does benefit from it now because he's coming to Inter. But I think he was a genuine mistake that he made.
Yeah, I think as well, after playing 38 games, the amount of personal investment you'd have yourself in genuinely wanting to achieve that place in the Champions League, even if you don't go on to play it yourself. I think it's very difficult to switch off after months and months and months of hard work and effort, to put yourself in that position where you can actually say, I achieved it on the field. In terms of the performances, I can't believe I'm going to say it about him again, because the last match I went to was when Inter played Napoli at home this season, and I was talking to a couple of guys walking to the stadium about the midfield that had been chosen. Because I heard them talking about it, they'd seen it on their phones, and they said Gagliardini and Brozovic were playing. I said to them, "Oh, not Brozovic, not again." And they said, hey, it's not like Gagliardini's playing particularly well. And I said, no, but Gagliardini is a good player. It's just that at the moment, mentally, he's not sharp. Brozovic is just horrendous. And I said that one story that I picked up on in a couple of weeks previous to that was how true it is, I don't know. But the Brozovic has declared, in the past anyway, declared that the only time he will engage himself in learning Italian is when he finds a female teacher to teach it to him. The two lads almost couldn't believe it, but because it was about Brozovic, they believed it. I mean, I believe it too. I think I heard it on another podcast or on an Italian radio station or something. But ever since he played that match, and he was really good in that, really, really performed superbly well. He's been the sort of beating heart of the team, and I think that's true again against Lazio. Without him, people talk about, okay, Gagliardini was missing the input that he could have had, but to me, Brozovic is a fundamental player for Inter now, and if he's got that confidence, and he obviously believes that Spalletti believes in him, and with Spalletti about to sign a contract extension until 21. To me now, Brozovic is the fundamental player to keep. There's all the talk about the plus Valenzas and so on, and the money that we need to make in terms of the financial fair play. But to me, he's been so fundamental in the last couple of months that it would just be stupid to sell him, even though the price that we paid for him those years ago has been sort of cancelled out now, and he would be an entire plus Valenza. I just don't see how can you sell sort of the beating heart of your team and expect to still make progress. What do you think of that, James?
Yeah, I think I'd have to echo a lot of what you said there. I mean, in the last couple of months, he has been Inter. His attitude as well. I mean, certain games, players' heads have dropped, but his never did. He's pretty much been the leader of the side, and I know Icardi's the captain, but for me, Brozovic has been playing as if he's the captain. He's driving the team forward. He's talking. He's commanding everyone around him, and he's been absolutely vital in pretty much all the big games lately. So I can't. If his form wasn't so good, I don't think Inter would have made the Champions League. So to sell him, I mean, unless you're bringing someone in that you're guaranteed is going to do as good, you can't sell him, and you can't guarantee transfers. Like, some players work out, some don't. So when you have a player in your team that is like fitting in and doing as good as he is, I mean, you can't sell him unless someone comes in with a ridiculous €100 million bid or something like that. And I can't see anyone bidding that much for him, and he's too vital to the team. For me personally, I think he's more vital to the team than Icardi is. What do you think of it, Anthony?
No, he's been fantastic since the speculation of him leaving, but all season he had really good form for me, and I think lately that the passion that he's shown, just echo what you've said, there'd be absolutely no point in letting him go. He's a fundamental part of our team now. He'll be in the starting 11 next season on every game for Spalletti. I think all the fans will agree that he's a very integral role. And considering it's a position that we figured we might have needed to strengthen in January, now we know that he's a fundamental part of it. We can focus on redeeming our more important transfers and focusing on maybe spending some of that money elsewhere. And, you know, what you just said before, James, having to get a new player in that position could cost anywhere of 50 to even 100 million. Why would you even do that when Brozovic is already there? So I've always liked Brozovic, and I'm more than happy to see him return to form and become one of the fundamental players in our squad, because he's got a great attitude, a leadership attitude. He's not afraid to speak up. When the going gets tough, he gets going. So happy to keep him on board.
And Brozovic would be my man of the match. Anthony, who would you have selected?
Yeah, I would have selected Brozovic as well.
And James?
And maybe Miranda,
yeah. And James?
Yeah, for me, it would have been Brozovic as well, but I'll have to say I was very impressed with D'Ambrosio this week. I mean, he looked very, very solid. He was right up there with Brozovic for me. Yeah,
I think we were talking about that last week, Anthony, that D'Ambrosio is probably not the fullback you want to lead you to the Scudetto, but there are worse fullbacks. There are worse fullbacks out there than D'Ambrosio, and that's probably a position where you can almost wait to invest rather than going all out to spend. Whose performance were you most disappointed in, James?
Well, I'd have to say Rafinha's. He wasn't as good as he had been in recent weeks, but in fairness to him, I think Lazio have played him out of the game. I mean, every time he got the ball, there was 2 or 3 around him. But I was just disappointed because I really thought that he was the one that was going to make this game work for Inter. I thought he'd be the one involved in everything, and he just wasn't as good as he has been in previous weeks. So I mean, he wasn't our worst performer on the night. It's just from how I expected him to play to how he played. It was a little bit disappointing, but he's still a great player.
And Anthony.
Yeah, I'd have to say Rafinha as well, but just like James said, he was man-marked out of the game, and that forced us to try and use our other options. And to be fair, there was nobody else I was really, really disappointed in. Like, I thought the first half we didn't play that well, and I would have said that Vecino didn't contribute very well, and he looked a little static and at times a little lost in midfield. But in the second half, when we turned up the tempo, he actually looked quite good, and there's absolutely no way I'd diss him now after that kind of header at the end there to put us in. So I'd have to say Rafinha as well, but as James said, he's still a great player, and he really should be the top priority in terms of redeeming him for next season, nice and quickly.
Yeah, I don't think I need to say who I'm going to pick. I think everybody who listens, and I certainly think you two would know. To me, the fact that Handanovic, I'm not saying that he has to save particularly the first one, because there is obviously a vicious deflection. But the fact that he doesn't even dive speaks volumes to me. I just don't think the man is engaged. I don't think it matters. It gives an impression that it doesn't matter. And then when he goes and does the same thing again on the second one, he just doesn't throw himself for it. It's just, to me, it's so lazy. And people will say, well, he's so big, his reflexes, for example, aren't and can't be as good as Julio Cesar's. But that said, he has an incredibly good record in terms of saving penalties, which suggests that his reflexes are very sharp. Also, Buffon is a huge guy, and I've never seen any problem with his reflexes. I just don't think it sends a good vibe, particularly when he's one of your most experienced players, when he's one of the players that's been at Inter the longest. It just doesn't send a good vibe throughout the rest of the team. That, look, our goalkeeper isn't even prepared to dive to save a shot. As I said, I don't blame him entirely for the first goal. I think it's just the impression that not diving gives, and it's very hard to lift a team if you've got that sensation of your goalkeeper not really trying. But hey, he is a very kind of Marmite type of player. He seems to be that you either love him or you hate him. I'm on obviously the negative side of that. Anthony, I know that your attitude towards him is more positive, so maybe you could come in there with your view of the 2 goals that we conceded.
Look, I think Handanovic saved us a lot of points in these dark last, 5 or 6 seasons or whatever it's been. So many games I have watched, I've just seen him pull off miraculous saves that have not only won us matches or have just saved us points in general. So maybe I do have a bit of a soft spot for him. But look, the fact of the matter is he is 33 years old, and goalkeepers can go obviously a little bit longer than outfield players, but he is 33 years old. So as much as an advocate I have been for him, and I am for him, I would not be against the idea of looking to invest some of our money into a new goalkeeper. I'm not too sure who we could be linked with. Maybe you guys could comment on one of that. But to be honest, the goals that Handanovic conceded over the weekend, I'll just comment. With the Felipe Luis goal, I really thought he could have made a dive for it. I was watching it, and as it went in, I just thought, wow, he really could have at least moved his feet a little bit, or at least made some sort of attempt. Even with the Perisic header and the deflection, he was just very, very late to react, just late to turn his head. It just seems like when we've needed him the most in the back half of this season, he's shown traits against what I've advocated for him for so long, and what I'm sure many fans have loved him for so long. But maybe it is part of a certain decline in his form, and if that's the case, then as I said before, I wouldn't be against investing in a new goalkeeper in the not too distant future. What do you guys think?
I mean, obviously, Buffon is available on a free transfer. I don't see that one coming off. But James, you're probably more in the neutral position on Handanovic. So just for sake of balance, what was your view?
Yeah, the last few weeks I've been kind of critical of him, but I didn't think he could have done much about both goals on the weekend. I mean, he did react slow, but I don't think many keepers would have saved either of those. Like the first one was a free goal off Perisic's face. Like it's hard to predict where the ball's going to go. And then that second one, it was a clinical finish, and he was running at speed, and he never once looked at the goals. Like it was a no-look shot. He just knew where the goals were, and that's very hard for goalkeepers to react to when the striker doesn't give any indication that he's going to shoot. I mean, and the ball's pretty much past him before he even noticed it. I think most keepers in that position, they might have made an attempt to dive, but I don't think there's many keepers in the world who would have saved that shot. But I think going forward into next season, and especially in the Champions League, I think we do need another keeper in, someone younger, because I think, as Anthony was saying, I think Handanovic is on the decline a little.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they're already projecting for the future. His name escapes me. There's a Ukrainian goalkeeper. He's only about 19 or 20 years of age, and half of Europe is apparently out to get him. Do either of you recall his name?
No, I can't.
No, not at all. Sorry.
There's been a lot in Gazzetta the last couple of weeks about him, that he's half of Europe. The name will probably come to me when I finish the show, but he's half of Europe is after him. He's about 19 or 20 years of age. He doesn't play for. Sorry?
Does he play for Zoya?
He does, yeah.
It's Andre Lonin, yeah?
Yes, that's him, exactly.
I remember Leicester City. I remember Leicester City was the only club I saw linked with him.
Right. No, Gazzetta is saying that a lot of the big clubs are around Europe are after him, but the Inter are the most convincing for him, because they're looking at a long-term solution to replace an aging Handanovic, that he's going to come in and that he's going to go on loan to Bologna for 2 seasons, and then he's going to come in and make the position his own. So I think that's the route that Inter are going down. Obviously, you have Perin, but I think Juventus are well down the line in terms of securing him as their replacement for Buffon. So I think if we move on and we just look at the newspapers, Gazzetta dello Sport, Inter scream we are in the Champions League. Best player Matthias Vecino, 7.5. Worst player Rafinha, 5. Corriere dello Sport, Inter change history. Best player Brozovic, 7.5. Worst players Cancelo, 5.5. Candreva, 5.5. Tutto Sport, crazy Inter. Best players D'Ambrosio, Vecino, Brozovic, 7. Worst players Candreva, Rafinha, 5. Milan's version of the Metro, mythical, and Rome's version of the Metro, incredible. Now, obviously, it's the end of the season. What's been the most memorable parts of it for you, Anthony?
Oh, for me, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is the 3-2 derby win over Milan. I remember just watching it before going to school in the morning to teach, and just remember seeing Milan tying it up at 2-2 after we were leading 2-1. I was so sure we were going to win that derby, and when they equalised, I was just so devastated, because at that point we were really on a high that season, and that would have really capped it off for me, that derby win. And when D'Ambrosio went down for that penalty and Icardi put it home, that was absolute elation for me. Now, as I said before, the feeling was more relief when we qualified for the Champions League this week. So I'm not going to say this week, because there was tons and tons of anxiety that was built up to this weekend. So for me, the best memory that comes to mind for me is the 3-2 derby win over Milan. What about you guys?
Yeah, James, what's your memory of the season?
Yeah, it'd probably have to be as well the derby win, but I suppose because it's so recent, I mean, the highlight of the season has to be for me on Sunday when we made the Champions League, when that final whistle went. I mean, because the season had promised so much early on and then had completely looked like we were going to finish 6th or 7th, and we somehow managed to find the mental strength to actually get to the Champions League. So I think the moment for me of the season was Sunday. It was the happiest I felt all season, and a little bit of relief as well.
To me, one thing that really sticks in mind is that first match against Sampdoria this season, certainly the first hour, where it was probably the most convincing Inter had been for at least the last couple of years anyway. The performance was excellent. It did drop off, but then when you have a good lead against a team, it is easy to switch off for the remainder of the match. It just showed that these players can actually play. Another thing was the first matches against Napoli and Juventus, which really sort of showed the grit and determination that was in the team. And then also something that I haven't seen for the last few years was the fact that it took them a long time, sort of from, was it middle of December onwards, to pick themselves up. But they did eventually pick themselves up and start to perform. And really, over the last couple of months, the score lines at the end of matches has lied a little bit. I mean, we definitely were good for the draw against Juventus. I think we should have beaten Torino. I think we should have beaten Milan. And the fact that after Juventus, we were able to pick ourselves up against Udinese, and the fact that after the terrible result against Sassuolo and being 2-1 down late on against Lazio, the fact that they were able to pick themselves up and still keep going to get themselves finally into the Champions League, I think you can't undervalue Spalletti's input on that. To me, it has been fundamental, and the side has made huge strides forward. One area I think that the team is going to reap benefit next year is after the International Champions Cup tournament last summer, which was played in China in swelteringly hot conditions, and Spalletti and a lot of the players complained about how hot and humid it was. And let's remember that Spalletti is, he's an Italian. He's not one of the blue people from Ireland or Wales like yourself and myself, James. Yeah. He's used to hot temperatures. Same with the likes of D'Ambrosio, and a lot of the players had been in Italy for a long time. They'd be accustomed to the hot weather. I mean, Anthony, you'd be more used to that living in Australia. But for them to go to China, had it been, I don't know, Manchester United or Celtic or somebody going to China and complaining about the heat, you could say, well, fair enough, they're coming from a relatively cool country. But with Italians going there, the heat must have been quite, very intense. The International Champions Cup, Spalletti said after it last year that under no circumstances was he playing it this summer if the club wanted to go to China or America or wherever, because of the conditions. So they're actually playing their matches in Europe this year. The 1st of August, Chelsea in Gothenburg, 7th of August, Sevilla in Lecce, 12th of August, Atletico Madrid in Madrid. Madrid and Lecce are going to be hot, but then they're going to be a heat that you would imagine people living in Italy are used to. Also, you don't have the massive travelling involved. And I just think it'll help to make them sharper at the start of next season. And it'll probably pay throughout the rest of the season, because tiredness, if it sets in early, it can be really difficult to overcome. What's your thoughts on that, Anthony?
Yeah, I think the traveling would be the biggest thing, to be honest, and just staying in a familiar climate and a familiar distance and not feeling as though you're so far away. It's also the mental effect on the players as well. If they feel they are traveling so far away for training, I don't know, maybe it just doesn't set in as serious to them, or maybe it can throw them off a little bit, especially if they return so close to the season when it kicks off. But I'm happy to hear that it was moved to Europe to stay as close as possible, and I think it'll benefit the players a lot more than last season. I think it should give the players a lot more confidence going forward into this season as well, because now when you look at it from that point of view, it really feels as though that it was a barrier last season leading into it. So it's a barrier that we don't have this season as well, and the squad can only get better. And to be honest, we've got a lot of squad members who aren't in the World Cup. Icardi missed out, and I think that's a real disappointment. I think he deserves it, but I don't want to go into the Argentina politics of him not making the World Cup. But we've got a lot of our players that won't be going to the World Cup with their squad, so a lot of them can actually get a jump pre-season quite early. I think that'll be a really big advantage. What do you guys think?
What do you think, James?
Yeah, I mean, having the pre-season games in Europe makes sense, especially with being in the Champions League next year. Like the early part of the season, we're going to be traveling around Europe, so it doesn't make sense to make unnecessary trips to Asia or North America. So, yeah, just on the Icardi thing, I'm kind of disappointing for him that he's not in the World Cup for him personally, but I think it's a huge benefit to Inter. I mean, because there's talk of him maybe leaving, and if he's not in the World Cup, he's fresh. He's not really in the limelight, so clubs mightn't be as willing to buy him, and I think we need to hold on to him. So having a lot of our players not at the World Cup, well, it's disappointing because Inter have had the most players from any club in the history of the World Cup, I think.
Yeah, I saw that on social media, yeah.
Yeah, it's disappointing that they're not there, but from a selfish point of view for Inter, I think it's better if our players are fresher going into the season at the start of next season, because we will have a lot of games. For a couple of months, we'll be playing twice a week, so the fresher they are, the better, I think.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's worth bearing in mind that some of the journeys that you can make in the Champions League, particularly in the group stages, can be arduous in themselves. I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can basically have a Kazakh team in the east in your group to an Icelandic team in the West. Now, I know the likelihood is that if teams from those countries are present at that stage, it's likely to be the Europa League that they'd be in. But I mean, it's still a huge amount of traveling. It's still a huge amount of traveling to do, and it's certainly not outside the realms of possibility that, for example, you could get a Russian team and you could get Celtic, and the traveling, but you know, those are good long journeys for players to be taking midweek. I was looking in Gazzetta this morning, and they said that they were showing the potential nightmare group and dream group for Inter in the Champions League. The nightmare group, they said, was Bayern, Real Madrid, and Tottenham. Whilst I understand from the point of view of quality, it would be a nightmare. In some ways, the travelling to those places is very minimal. And in some ways, it might not be the worst thing, because I do think that this is still a rebuilding process. And even if we were to miss out on progressing in the Champions League, if we could get third place, and I don't want to put a dampener on it, obviously. I mean, I dream of us going and winning the whole tournament. But I think we need to sort of stay with steady feet on the ground and just accept that, you know, this is a rebuilding process. And we're still going to have a relatively thin squad. So the travelling distance is the thing that would worry me most in terms of the Champions League. What would be your view on that, James?
That's it. You can get really tough away fixtures. I think the year we won it, we had Rubin Kazan, which is a long, long way to go. But you're in the Champions League. I mean, if you get a tough group with the big teams, well, that's what the Champions League is all about, is playing the big teams in Europe. And I know everyone wants to progress out of the group, and I think Inter should be going in with the mentality that they can go into this Champions League and win it. I mean, like this season, we've seen Liverpool, who hadn't been in it for a couple of years, who finished fourth in England last year, get to the final by just making a couple of key signings. I mean, there's nothing stopping Inter to do that with the spine of the team to have one or two key signings, and they should be going in with the mentality that we want to win this tournament. I mean, that's Inter, a big club. They've won it 3 times previously. So, to me, if you get the group of death, you still should be looking to come out of that group. And personally, even if it was those 3 teams you mentioned, I still wouldn't be happy if we didn't get out of the group. I know it might be a little bit harsh and it's a rebuilding phase, but Inter's a big, big club and their mentality should be to win it, I think. What's your take on it, Anthony?
No, I kind of agree, man. To be honest, I'm just so excited to be back in the competition because it brings so many other technical advantages to our club as a whole, the worldwide exposure. So if you're telling me that we get drawn in a group with Real Madrid that takes us to the Bernabeu, I say bring it on. If we get drawn in a group that takes us to Old Trafford to play Manchester United or to play Manchester City or Barcelona, I say bring it on. Let's get Inter back on the big stage, back in front of all the biggest fans in the world, back where we belong, back on the map. More attention, the better, and I think we'll rise to the occasion. So I'm very well aware that our squad, as thin as it may be, needs to take this competition very seriously, and I hope Spalletti next season instills that pretty much every single match in the group stage should be a final to these players to get as many points as possible. If we come up against a really big team and we really need to grind out for that 1 point away from home against a really top gun team, then we need to do it. If we really need to grind out those wins at home, we need to do it. But I just agree with James. I think I'm just really happy to be there, and I say bring on the bigger clubs, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about the technical aspects that it brings, and I think that's key because I haven't had chance to read it yet. But in today's Gazzetta dello Sport, they're talking about the transfer campaign that Inter are looking at going with this summer. And some of the names just jump out at you. For example, they're seriously going after Kevin Strootman now. Justin Kluivert from Ajax, who's Patrick's son, is a serious target. Matteo Politano, and Gazzetta is also saying that we're almost certain to get Simone Verdi. I just don't think you're looking at that kind of transfer campaign if we'd fail to qualify for the Champions League. Who of those names jumps out at you, Anthony?
Well, the first thing that would jump out to me would probably be Justin Kluivert, but we've only started being linked with him recently. I didn't think we were such a front runner for him, but I'd like to take him. I've seen him play for Ajax this season, and I think he's very, very good winger overall. I think he cuts in very well, can put in good crosses, and overall he's very quick as well. Simeone Verdi, I will definitely take him because he can play quite well on the right-hand side, and I'm just all for Candreva not being in the starting 11 anymore. I think we are going to sell Candreva in this Mercato, to be honest, so I'm all for Simone Verdi coming in. To be honest, though, I'm going to say that new names isn't what really excites me. To be honest, what really excites me and what I'm really impressed with is the way Inter have wrapped up some key transfer business and finalized these deals for Asamoah, De Vrij, and Martinez. These are 3 very serious transfers, and whatever comes on top of this is just a bonus. We're in a position where we've got these 3 transfers already in, and if we can lock down the Rafinha and Cancelo permanent moves, these are great, massive strides, all coming hit after hit after hit. I'm very, very impressed with it all. So before I'm jumping the gun and looking at these new transfers, I'm very impressed with these past ones. But the Simone Verdi one, I'd say I'm very happy to see these rumors actually have some substance because I would like to have him in the starting side. What do you guys think?
Yeah, James, who jumps out at you of those names there?
Personally, I think Strootman. I mean, I think he's been linked with Manchester United as well as Kluivert is. And that's the beauty, I suppose, of being back in the Champions League. You get linked with the big players that the big European clubs are linked with. But I personally would like to have Kevin Strootman in the team. I mean, like we do have Brozovic and Gagliardini, who for me are the starters right at the minute. But yeah, I think we have to get rid of Borja Valero, and we've seen those kind of hit and miss. And it's like I think earlier on, Anthony, in a few episodes ago, Anthony was questioning his mental strength in games, and I kind of have to agree with him. So I don't know if you could rely on him in big European games. I think that central midfield area is vital. Kluivert will be a good one to get, and I think the Vardy deal, from what I was reading on a website this morning, is pretty much a done deal. I think they're just finalising it, so he'd be a good striker to have as well. But I think keeping Rafinha and Cancelo is obviously a huge thing now. I mean, they've been two of our better players. So, and like Anthony said, with the early business we've done already, we pretty much have the spine of the team there. It's just adding a couple of players here and there for depth. I mean, you're going to have a bit of squad rotation, playing twice a week. So having a couple of players come in like Vardy and Strootman, I think for me would really, really give Inter a good chance to fight on both fronts in the Champions League and in Serie A.
Yeah, I just think I'd echo what Anthony said there in terms of the business that we've already done this season. The fact that we've got De Vrij, Asamoah and Martinez signed up so early really kind of speaks volumes of how un-Inter, like compared to the last few seasons, this year's transfer session, has been. There's obviously a change. There's a change in the club. There's still changes that need to be made. I still say that bringing out the players' children against Sassuolo smacked of an amateurishness inside the club. But this is the way that they've gone about their business this year is really professional. And it also means that those players are available for pre-season training. It also means that they're not rushed signings. They're signings that the club was able to take their time with. It's really fundamental, and I think that's a huge starting block for the rest of the summer. Just looking ahead at the next season, I think we can build on this. We certainly need to strengthen the squad in depth. I think we're already halfway to doing that with the 3 signings that we have. But the key thing is to make sure that we qualify for the Champions League again next year, and that is going to require more options than just sort of the 12 or 13 players that have been most used this season. I mean, again, I stress that to me it's a rebuilding process, and I'd be quite satisfied next year with even a 3rd or 4th place finish again. James, where would you like to see the team finish next year?
I think everyone would like to see them win it, but I mean, you have to be realistic. I mean, I think Napoli, the points they amassed this season, would have won the league in any of the past, I think, 4 or 5 seasons. So, like, the strength of Serie A is getting better. All the top teams are getting stronger every year. So I think winning it next season with having the Champions League as well might be a step too far. I think I'd have to agree with you. Like, if we can get 2nd or 3rd and show that we made progress and have a decent run in the Champions League, at least get to the knockout phase and maybe win the cup or something like that, I'll be more than happy with not winning a Scudetto, but definitely having a good Champions League campaign. And I mean, it's about qualifying it year in, year out now. It can't be just that we're back this one season and we're happy we're back. This has to be Inter are back in the Champions League every season the way it used to be. That it was just a given you had Champions League football. I mean, that's the bare minimum, I think, for a club of this size. What do you think of it, Anthony?
Yeah, I think just continuing on with that, I think it's about showing consistency. So, for example, while I'd love to win the Scudetto, that's the ultimate dream, I don't expect them to win it. But what would be great is, say, by match day 32, 33, 34, we have Champions League qualification sealed for next season already, just to consistently be performing at a top level next season where maybe we look like genuine contenders for a while. But if the going does get tough and, say, the be-all and end-all isn't winning the title, I won't be sitting here sulking. But to consistently see that the team is performing well and that is genuine Champions League material. And as you said, James, getting to the knockout phase would be absolutely fantastic. But yeah, just performing well on a genuine, consistent basis, not having that mid-season collapse where we go, 8 or 9 games with only 1 win. So that would be the main objective for next season, I say.
And Anthony, I know that in terms of Rafinha and Cancelo, there's been a lot of talk in the Australian interest community, and that you've been getting a lot of feedback on that issue. Do you want to fill us in?
Yeah, so we ran a poll in one of the Facebook inter-communities with about 250 votes, with the vote between Rafinha and Cancelo, with who would you redeem for next season, and with about 60% saying Rafinha and 40% saying Cancelo. One comment from Daniel said he wishes we could keep both, but if he'd had to choose between the two, he would choose Rafinha, as he offers an element in midfield that we have not seen in a while, and he thinks that it's a little bit more difficult to replace a player like Rafinha to a player like Cancelo. It's a pretty good comment, but for me personally, I agree, and I would definitely think about more redeeming Rafinha. But with qualifying for the Champions League, I'm under the fair bit of the impression that we should be able to execute our power in redeeming both. And I, for one, would like us to make the mature alpha decision and absolutely go for it and redeem both. I think while we would benefit immensely from having Asamoah over on that left-hand side, and I think D'Ambrosio is a good right back, I don't think he is a world-class right back, and I would much more feel more comfortable with Cancelo at right back next season. And if all Valencia are asking for is 35 million, and when you take into account the Murillo and Kondogbia elements to the deal, we really should be able to tie that deal up with no questions asked now that we've qualified for the Champions League. What do you guys reckon about all that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think we should be able to, with being in the Champions League now, I think we should be able to tie up both. That said, I think I said before, I do believe that Rafinha is the key one to tie down, because I think it's so hard to find an attacking midfielder, a flair midfielder, who fits in well into your team. It's very, very hard to find one who arrives and slots in straight away, as Rafinha has done. And it's also very hard to find somebody who's as professional as Rafinha is. That's not to say that Cancelo isn't professional, but Rafinha is just, he's so focused. To me, it's incredible. I just think that that's the one where we have to tie him down. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with, excuse me, I'd have to agree with both of you on the fact that Rafinha is the more crucial one. I mean, like, Cancelo is a very good defender, but I think having D'Ambrosio instead of him, it is a little bit of a loss. But having somebody else instead of Rafinha, I think, is a huge loss. I mean, for me, he's been in that role. He's been the best player we've had since Wesley Sneijder. I mean, he comes in and he fits into the team really well. And even though he's only here on loan, like, he's shown more heart and more determination than half these guys that have been here for a few seasons. So, like, it's not just his technical abilities and what he can do with the ball, it's his influence on the team as well. I think if we sign him up for the next, and we have him for the next 4 or 5 years, I think he's going to be a key player and one of the best players in that position in the world. I can just see him growing and growing into it. And he seems to have a love for Inter. He seems very passionate for the team. So I think of any signing, I think he's the most crucial one, even in regards to new players that we could be bringing in that we don't know yet about. I still think Rafinha is the most important signing that we make this summer.
Yeah, we ran a poll on the Inter Show's Twitter page this past week, with a few ideas of how to continue the Inter Show over the summer months. Overwhelmingly, people voted in favour of a transfer news show. So you keep posted to the Twitter page to find out more about that. The aim is hopefully to run it every week. Obviously news dependent. If the news is slower, it might go to every fortnight. But the aim is to run it every week, in one form or another. In terms of other news, Nagatomo won his first ever league champions medal, playing for Galatasaray at the weekend. They beat Göztepespor 1-0 away, which is enough for them to secure the Turkish league title. And I from Nagatomo's reaction after the match, I kind of got the feeling that he's settled as well into Galatasaray in Turkey as Rafinha has into Inter and Italy, which I think is really positive to see, because I always thought he's never been the most technically gifted of players, but he's always a player that gave 110%. At times that 110% wasn't quite good enough, but I think that was more to do with his overall ability than any sort of lack of heart. So I thought that was great to see him finally win a league championship. Parma are back in Serie A next year, which after what happened to them can only be good news. It's kind of a miracle rise from those dark days, because they were promoted from Serie D, Serie C, Serie B in consecutive seasons, and are now back where they were considered they belong in the top flight. The biggest news in terms of other Inter teams that happened this week, I suppose, was Inter Forever, the team for past players of Inter, played 2 games. They beat Chelsea 4-1 in a charity match, and it was dedicated to Ray Wilkins. Materazzi, Suazo, and Karagunas scored the 4 goals. Sorry, Karagunas with 2 goals, the others with 1 each. And Norwich and played the Inter Forever team, which was it ended in a 2-1 win. Again, it was for charity, and Materazzi scored again, and Fulston with an own goal. Materazzi scoring evidently more often for Inter Forever than he ever scored for the first team. Did either of you see those games?
James?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of the Norwich game on Sunday afternoon. Materazzi scored a very good free kick. It was good to see some of the old players, but I mean, at that stage of career, it's pedestrian football. I was looking at thinking I could go out there and score a couple of goals, but it was good to see, and there was a good crowd at Carrow Road, and it was all for charity. So, but one news story that you just mentioned that I'm really happy to see Parma back in Serie A. I mean, when I was getting into Serie A in the 90s, I mean, they had a fantastic team. I think they had the likes of Varane, Buffon, Thuram, Cannavaro, Crespo. I mean, it's really good to see them come back from the depths of Italian football back into Serie A. I think because they're a well-known club around Europe, so I think the more big clubs that are in Serie A, the more it'll do well internationally. So I was glad to see that.
Yeah, and in terms of the history section, I mean, we're recording this on the 22nd of May. I think there's only one thing that we can mention in terms of history, with the date in mind. 8 years ago, James and I were in Milan, in Piazza del Duomo, to watch a particularly significant match, the Champions League final, which we won against Bayern Munich 2-0, and we completed the treble. I think both of us, and you can have your feedback on this in a second, James. But I think both of us realised that getting Champions League final tickets was going to be an impossibility for us, unfortunately. So instead of choosing to go to Madrid, we flew over to Milan to watch it, where we'd be guaranteed a great atmosphere. What's your recollections of that weekend, James?
Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. I mean, like you said, it would have been incredibly expensive, I think, to go to Madrid as well. And like going to Milan was a no-brainer. I mean, like those scenes in the piazza were just crazy. I think there must have been 80, 100,000 people there. Flags, the flares, and like when each goal went in, we just got swept away with the crowd moving. It was amazing. I think at one stage at the end of the night, I remember you were dancing and singing in a fountain outside St. Castle, Andrew.
Yeah, and a very funny story. James and I obviously had been enjoying the festivities quite a bit. Word started to go around the square that the Inter team was coming back with the trophy to the San Siro that night to parade it in front of everyone. James, I think more sensibly than myself, said that he was going back to the hotel because he was just absolutely exhausted after the day that was in it, because it was also blisteringly hot. We'd obviously been enjoying ourselves a little, probably a little too much. And I decided to walk from the centre of Milan to the San Siro, which is a fair stretch when you're in the best of conditions. I got to the San Siro, went into the curva, waiting for the players to arrive with the trophy, and I fell sound asleep and woke up just as people were starting to leave, because the trophy had been paraded in front of me when I'd been flat out asleep in the seat in the curva. So hopefully they're going to win it again sometime, so that I can actually see them bring the trophy back to Milan. Anthony, what's your recollection of it?
Of the final, well, I guess I can relate to you on the sleep side of things. As you know, we don't exactly get the most convenient viewing times here in Australia. But I remember the game taking place just as I was studying for my finals in my senior year of high school. And to be honest with you, I actually fell asleep in the 30th minute, and had my father not dropped a coffee mug on the floor and shattered glass all over the floor in the 47th minute, I may have actually slept through that whole match, to be honest. But I jolted myself awake in the 47th minute and was able to see the rest of the match, and jumping for joy and crying at the end. It was absolutely fantastic. I wasn't that old at the time. I was only 17, but I just remember being able to go to school and show off with as much pride as possible. So it was still a beautiful morning, but because it did happen at such a young age, once you get older, you do realize how much you've taken it for granted. So I just can't wait to see that moment again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's brings us to the end of the show. So thank you, Anthony and James, for joining me again. I'll sign off now and say Forza Inter. And as I said, James and Anthony, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us on Forza Inter.
Forza Inter, boys. Till next time.
This is the part of the show where we add on, as an extra, a translation of a well-known chant. This week, Noi abbiamo l'Inter nel cuore, we have Inter in our hearts. It's a short but popular chant which can be heard a lot in Curva Nord. This week, the show, for reasons which I'm sure you can appreciate, was longer than usual. So we've gone with a shorter chant this week. Longer chants will feature as we continue with the show, but we hope you enjoy it, and it's coming up now. Noi abbiamo l'Inter nel cuore, we have Inter in our hearts, and until next week, Forza Inter.
podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.